it comes from the Italian sonnet, which is called the Petrarchan sonnet. There was a poet named Petrarch that came up with a fixed form of poetry. Does everyone know what a sonnet is exactly? Yeah, it's a 14-line poem, and it's written in iambic pentameter. We're not going to get into that, but it's called it's a type of fixed form, and there are certain rules in what you can and can't do. For a sonnet, it's 14-line poem. It has to have so many, 14-line poem, and it has a particular rhyme scheme. We all know what a rhyme scheme is? Okay. The way that we designate rhymes on rhyme schemes is you look at the last word, the last line of each line, and you designate that rhyme with a lowercase a, b, c, d, e, or f. So, and the words that rhyme, they go together. So you have, if you look at Sonnet 18, day and temperate. Well, then day is what? A. Temperate doesn't rhyme with day, I don't think. So you have A, B. Day, May, so it's A, B, A. Now, temperate and date, do they rhyme? Well, it depends on if you're saying temperate or date. But that's called an I rhyme because they look like they should rhyme. Right? Like to your eyes, they rhyme, I rhyme. Yeah. So they look like they should rhyme on paper, so they do rhyme. So day, temperate, May, date. So A, B, and then shines, right? Dimmed, C, D. Declines, untrimmed, D, right? Dimmed, untrimmed. Okay, then fade, A, B, C, D, E. E for fade. Oest is F. Shade, E. Fade and shade, E. Yep. And then growest is F. So in this one it's A, B, C, D, E, F, E, F. And then the last two lines are G, G. And a rhymed, two lines that rhyme, like the GG rhyme, that's called a couplet. And the Shakespearean sonnets, most of them go like this. They follow some type of A, B, C, D, E, F rhyme scheme, and then they all end with a couplet, a GG rhyme. Now the AB rhymes can be AB, like this one, C, D, E, F, G, G, or they can be A, B, A, C, D, C, E, F, E, and then G, G. And those are the two types of sonnets. And this type is the Shakespearean sonnet that's so common. Now, the reason that these sonnets get a bad rap, they kind of get a bad name, just sonnets in general, and the reason that they're seen as kind of cheesy, melodramatic, over-the-top, kind of emotional stuff, is because they came from Italian. And can anyone guess the difference between, besides the just blatantly obvious answer of what a difference between an Italian sonnet or an Italian poem and an English poem is, besides the different words? Yeah. Would you? I mean, I know. When I was in Europe, I made some buddies, and I had a guy from France, and I'd hang out and stuff, and he spoke horrible English, but when we would go out, we'd meet other like travelers and stuff, and not that I'm like, I guess, much of an authority on the subject, but I really didn't. He wasn't exactly like much to look at. You know what I mean? Not to be insulting, but he wasn't like a model or anything, and actually kind of ugly looking, and like women would just like fall all over this guy anytime that he spoke because he was French. It was just the accent. Like, you can take the ugliest guy on the planet and you give him a French accent or an Italian accent, and he becomes like 10 times more attractive to women for some reason. Oh, and it's not for some reason. It's because English doesn't sound good to the ears, right? But Italian and French, they sound pretty. It's a beautiful language, romance language. And English isn't. We're a Germanic language. And the problem with English poetry, what Shakespeare kind of did to change English poetry, is that he made it sound good, or he made English poems sound good to the mind, in the sense that he was able to manipulate words and craft them in such to evoke a feeling or paint a picture in your mind, as opposed to having it sound good to your ears. Because Italian and French, they just sound good. And in Italian, it doesn't take much to rhyme, because everything ends in a vowel, right? It ends in an I or it ends in an O. It's not difficult to rhyme anything in Italian. So Italian poets were concerned with the aesthetic quality of the poem. They were concerned with it sounding good. Now, the English language is different, but what English poets started to do was translate these Italian poems into English. And the problem is that they're two different languages. So in Italian, if they're trying to make the poem sound pretty, well, the English guys were just translating those pretty sounds into English, which doesn't sound good. So you were left with very, very like kind of corny and cheesy lines, right? There wasn't a lot of thought put into the words, because they were translating something that sounded good into something that doesn't sound good, but they had the same words and same meaning. And so what Shakespeare did was, he basically said, well, look, I've got this fixed form. I know that I'm going to set these restraints. I'm going to follow this pattern, but I'm going to take the inside. I'm going to take the words and make them at least seem intelligent, right? Or give them some type of depth, some type of meaning. And it's like, again, it's no different between like a pop song. If you tell someone you like pop music, that's not really a good thing, right? Like if you say, like no one's like really proud about the fact that they're a big fan of pop music. But unless she is she? Because you gave her a look.
She makes me listen to that hit list.
Yeah. Okay. I'm sorry. Run. Not really. I'm sure you're lovely. Okay. So, but again, pop music. That's what I was talking about with the Beatles, right? There's good pop music, and then there's like Justin Bieber, right? I fully believe he listens to Justin Bieber. So disappointing. My point exactly. There's bad stuff and there's good stuff, and you know, with pop music is a genre of music, right? You've got 3 minutes, right? 2.5 minutes, 3.5 minutes. You got to have the verse, the bridge, and the chorus, and then you've got to have a catchy hook, and it doesn't take much. Like what's that Bieber song, the baby, oh, whatever. Yeah. Like you listen to that and it's caught in your head and it sucks, right? There's nothing good about it. Like there's nothing good about it. It's just like trash. But it's got that hook, so that it's composed of the same elements as like a Beatles song that has the same type of hook. It has a sense of melody, but the lyrics are actually meaningful, and that's the difference. Like Shakespeare and then the other guys, right? They're all using the same form. It's all like pop music. It's just some of it is more well written than the others, and that's what Shakespeare kind of tried to give some meat or some substance to this form. And on Sonnet 18, he kind of starts off with I guess more of a cliche. It's, "Shall I compare thee to a summer's day?" Have we heard this before? Have we heard "Shall I compare thee to a summer's day"? I mean, it's a pretty famous or widely used, like when people are talking about poetry, is this one, or like I compare you to or my love is like a red, red rose, or whatever. And that's common with these sonnets and these poems, is comparing a woman to something in nature. So he says, "Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate. Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May, and summer's leaves has all too short a date. Sometimes too hot the eye of heaven shines, and often is his gold complexion dimmed, and every fair from fair sometimes declines, by chance or nature's changing course untrimmed. But thy eternal summer shall not fade, nor lose possession of that fair thou owest, nor shall death brag thou wanderest in his shade, when in eternal lines to time thou growest. So long as men can breathe or eyes can see, so long lives this, and this gives life to thee." So what's this about? Well, what does he compare her to? But is she better than a summer's day? Okay. And by the way, summer's a good thing. Like it's not in this poem. Summer's like not down here where it's a friggin' sauna. Like you want to be outside. It's not a sauna and like where you want to stay indoors. And So yeah, shall I compare thee to a summer's day? You're so much better than a summer's day. And on the third line, he says, rough winds do shake the darling buds of May. The winds changing the season, taking the buds, right, the flowers, shaking them off the trees. Summer's lease hath all too short a date. You don't want summer to end. What does spring and summer normally represent? Growth, birth, life, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so what comes after summer? Right, yeah, the fall, the winter, and death. And so he's comparing her to a summer's day, comparing her to summer that is life, and not wanting the winter to come, not wanting death. And he says, by chance her nature's changing course untrimmed, but thy eternal summer shall not fade. So he declares that she's going to live on forever. Either she will live on forever, or it's not really clear if it's just going to be her or their love, I guess, for one another will continue to live on and not die away. He says, nor lose possession of that fair thou owest, nor shall death brag thou wanderest in his shade. So he's saying that death will not take possession of her, or cannot boast that death has her in his clutches. When in eternal lines to time thou growest, so long as men can breathe, their eyes can see, so long lives this, and this gives life to thee. Now, what does he mean, or what is he talking about when he says, when in eternal lines to time thou growest? What lines is he talking about? What lines? And on third to the last line it says, when in eternal lines to time. What lines is he referring to?
Like the years of life.
What is a poem made up of? Lines. So it says, when in eternal lines to time thou growest, so long as men can breathe or eyes can see, so long lives this, and this gives life to thee. So what he's doing is he's talking about in these lines, in these lines, the eternal lines to time thou growest, as long as men can breathe or eyes can see. He memorializes her. Yeah, he memorializes her in this poem. He talks about her, he describes her being more lovely, more beautiful than a summer's day, and kind of encapsulates her. And as long as people are still reading the poem, as long as people are still seeing the poem, still discussing the poem, then her memory will live on, or she will live on in some way. Her spirit, her essence, whatever, will live on forever. He's not, being grandiose and saying, she'll physically live on. He knows that, but the idea of memorializing her and keeping like a time capsule, I guess, for their love, and this being it, and everyone knowing their love or knowing his feelings for her, because we're reading it. I mean, not by choice. I know it's being forced on you, but he has a certain point, because it's 400 years later, and again, people are still reading. And so his sonnets, the majority of his sonnets were written for this woman they call the Dark Lady, because no one really is exactly sure who he was writing these sonnets for. But this seems to be like this constant muse in the sonnets that he's writing this for. That's kind of a mystery woman, and again, we don't know who she is, but he is writing these for her, and out of her inspiration from her, and